So I'm here with you, Adam Everill from Studio Gyris. We're going to chat about the project. We're going to chat about the community, but I'm really excited to talk about the world building element of what you're doing. And like, you know, as the founder, you're billing yourself as the chief storyteller, which I think is fantastic from a world building point of view. I've always had this kind of thesis in the last couple of years as game dev, or the gaming world takes over the filmmaking industry with virtual production, adding another layer of NFTs and this crazy world of Web3 on top of that just opens up this amazing opportunity for world building and world creation. And I think what you're doing so far with Gyris, and that, you know, you've got your mint coming up very shortly, which I'm sure you're preparing for and having many sleepless nights over. You know, I think it's a really unique project, and even, you know, more attractive to me, it's an Aussie project. It's, you know, you're based here on the East Coast, and I'm just really pumped to learn a bit more and chat about what you're doing and go a bit in depth and kind of slow down, I guess. You know, everything's about the hype cycle and trying to, you know, answer those questions of when mint, when free, you know, when sell out. But I think this is so much more than just the launch. So
there will come a time when a world of our making becomes so real, it cannot be divorced from our own. No longer will you ask what is real, but what form at birth once poured from the crucible. Unto this fire, our world is born.
Well, let's jump into the project itself. So
Cool.
when did it, take me to the origins, when did it kick off, and like what's been the progress so far?
So it started, man, it's like the Forrest Gump story. It started at the beginning of my life, to be honest. You know, started way back when I was young. You know, this whole thing has so much of my family and friends in it. It really has been a massively long journey, and I have a deep sense that it'll be part of my journey for a really long time going forward. I grew up in the family home looking up at this mountain, and it never really had a ton of significance for me. And then I moved back with my parents after 20 years in a breakdown and you know, having to move my kids back as a man, you know, trying to provide for my children, trying to still be a leader for my organization. My day job is I run a charitable organization in Papua New Guinea, and not feeling too powerful. So I thought if I could start running, I didn't run, but if I could start running and run really far, I could raise money for my organization. So I started to do that.
Like literally a Forrest Gump story, right?
Literally a Forrest Gump. So I went from 0 to, I did the length, and I replicated Kokoda, a little bit more actually, 104 kilometers, 6,500 meters elevation in 22 hours. I was supposed to do that in Kokoda, but COVID. So I did it, and I fell in love with these mountains, and they saved me. But I started riding Gyris 2 years ago, Easter. I wrote it the night before. It took me about 3 hours to write the idea of what will become film 2. It was called Argus and Amala. I wrote it as a way to get my children to go the mountains that I feel sort of saved my life. So they found the letter in an Easter egg hunt, because it was like next to, I put one of the Easter eggs in like an old box of my grandfather's with all these old stamps, and like made the scroll so it looked really old. And I was like, and it was so perfect. I wish I could have filmed it, because my son's up there. We're crawling through the attic. We're like Easter egg hunt at the attic, and he's crawling through. I'm like, oh, any more? Oh, I found this. And he grabs it, and it was sitting inside this big box. And he said, oh, what's this? And kind of pulls it out, and he's like, oh, stamps. You know, probably thinking these could be worth a bit. I was like, what is
Thinking these
that
can be
scroll?
traded.
Yeah, for sure. And I was like, what is this scroll? And he's like, I don't know. Opens it. He's like, and he's kind of reading it. I was like, whoa, okay, well, let's take that downstairs. And we're sitting around there kind of looking at their eggs. I'm like, so what's this? And they're opening it. Anyway, I was like, okay, we're going on a walk. we're going to follow this. And it was like a treasure map. So took the story and we went and started with my parents, which was really cool. And, put their little backpacks on and started, this is kind of how you find the mine. And, it's a, these are the bearings, it was like southeast, and started down and started following the story. They did 17 Ks that day. They're only, my daughter was 7, my son was I think 10 at the time, and it was just a really beautiful day. Kept finding the clues, like, oh, that must be the statue. That statue looks like it might be a mala, like all this different stuff. It was just it was a really cool experience. But it was, so we wandered around and my daughter asking me questions. I kept just making shit up at bed, and she was like, and then what happened? And then she would ask me questions, and I had to build it because she would ask, how come? It was like, oh, well. So I think about it, and I started writing a ton more. I started at as far back as you probably could. At the beginning of the creation of gods, and then from them, it is a world like ours, but just kind of started from a different point, and the beautiful randomization that happened in a place like Earth. So the single cell divided, and the great evolution that has become the myriad of awesomeness that is Earth has happened in Gyris. It's just that it just had a different starting point. And so it is a world that feels familiar, but filled with fantasy and different from our own. And this time in history, we can augment that creativity with all this fucking awesome tech, and you can take people into the world that you create. If you listen to the words from that intro, it's kind of outlining this grander narrative, this philosophy around creativity and collaboration being God. The idea that we as humans collectively imagine, and imagination, creativity is God. We talk about, people talk about God, religious people, as the creator. But if you think about simulation theory, and you think about that idea that, if virtual reality, if we take it that virtual reality will become so good that it will be indiscernible from our own reality. I fell in love with crypto because of its power to completely revolutionize a whole bunch of stuff. DeFi was that kind of first real love that I had, coming from a space working with people in settings that they have fuck all, and thinking about how difficult it is to take money out of a bank account, and how much you get charged in Papua New Guinea, and you're some of the poorest people in the world. Like, what the fuck are we doing here? And so having a personal experience with that, and understanding that is a way to, at least in part, reshape our global financial system. I found that to be fucking sexy as. I've talked about Satoshi being the greatest superhero the world has fucking ever had, really, because when has there been someone like this who's turned up, changed the world, has changed the world forever, didn't take credit? That's the shit of movies that doesn't happen in real life, and so that for me was like the storyteller in me. I think the story of Satoshi kicked fucking decentralization off in a way that made it inevitable. He was the
story, right? Like, that's it. The only way we understand the world is through story.
So
only way.
He was the prophet. He was the fucking Jesus, man. He was like that kind of gave us our North Star, and still remains that. You couldn't have scripted it better. So when I think about, they're not separate for me. The story of crypto is fucking. I find it so good, and it's just, it gets a bad rap. On the kind of film side of things and creativity side of things, you know, we're now seeing, so there's these anonymous interviews that come out of surveys that come out of like Hollywood and the industry, asking you know, questions of people within the space, and it looks overwhelmingly like a place where people are afraid to speak their opinion, and where the story is no longer central to storytelling, which is fucking crazy. Because good story has always been the way to bring people together, to bridge the divide between, you know, rich and poor, between races. It's good film, it's good storytelling. It's been the story that you tell when you sit around the fucking campfire. It has always been that. Stories are everything. Stories have always been what makes us human. It is the, you know, the hero's journey, you know, has been with us since we started to communicate. That is how we navigate. That is how we feel like we're human. That is how we as individuals succeed and be happy. It is
so we measure our value, our worth, our happiness. Yeah.
And when you have this, when you corporatize and you take creativity out of the hands of the creatives that develop it, you take the essence of it, or the ingya, as the Buddha would say, the soul. You take it, and we see, like, I don't know if it's just me. I know it's not just me. But you know, there's something now that is very different about like film and TV. There's some. It is in one way the golden age, and in another way the opposite.
Well, that side of the business, it's a treadmill of content. Like, and Netflix is finding now, Disney's even finding these huge companies are looking at the abyss and going, if we don't feed this machine with content, we die.
Yep.
And that's the model that they've found themselves in, where what you're talking about is building a robust, resilient world that can have many offshoots.
Yeah.
You know, it can be a linear narrative film. It can be an NFT project. It can be a game. It can be all of these different things. But what is at its core is this world and the community that you're building around the mythology of it. And those stories are like the anchors of our society. It is like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is the Shakespearean kind of anthology, the classical Greek theatre. When those narratives, that mythology embeds itself in our imaginations, it lives forever. Whereas if you're pumping out content, it's just a pithy little story that, you know, is like a rom-com, or, you know, not anything wrong with entertainment, but it doesn't have that depth that I get from Gyro. And that's why I think, you know, it's such an interesting project for me.
Yeah.
What's your ambitions for the community that you're building around it? Like, who do you hope to draw to the myth, to the mythology, to the project? And how do you see the contribution of the community helping this project sustain itself and grow over time and continue to build?
Yeah, I told my community I was going to tell them, just before I went to bed last night, I was like, remind me of the time. Remind me to tell you of the time that God spoke to me. Now that sounds fucking mental, right? So every time I start with that, people are like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" So I'm not a religious guy. I'm still not a religious guy. My co-founder over in Papua New Guinea, Equal Playing Field, deeply religious. Always sends me home with Bibles. Now, it was really weird. I was over in PNG one day, completely sober. It wasn't a hangover, anything like that. I was asleep and I was woken up by a fucking booming voice. And it was saying, Adam, wake up. You need to start the church. You got to wake up. You got to start the church. And I fucking woke up to, like, I've never had anything like it. I woke up because I was being yelled at, you know? And I was like, I fucking got up and I was like, that's weird. And I messaged my best mate. I was like, dude, weird story.
Yeah.
God just spoke to me. Obviously, you know,
this is your Kanye moment, you realize.
It was the depth of my, the depth of me screaming out, I think, you know? It was my conscience saying, there is a thing that you're supposed to be doing. You fucking need to do it. Now, this is many years into EPF, you know, like as a foreigner, I was able to start an organization, you know, that's grown to be one of the largest in that country, in one of the most difficult places you could possibly do something. You know, I'd been having these conversations with different people and you know, people that I was listening to. Jordan Peterson's a really good example, talking about this idea that we've lost this sense of community that we once had.
Through religion and institution and that kind of...
Yeah, because you would turn up and you would be part of a community and you would do and there was always a framework for community within the church, and we lost that. And what we did in places like Australia is we didn't replace it with anything, and we have this massive disconnection. There's so many people who are alone and you know, men in particular.
Yeah,
they are fucking lost. And I would experience these communities over in PNG, and whereas I started like, I'm an atheist or I'm an agnostic or whatever, I would just engage in whatever they were doing, because I started to realize that actually all of this kind of we all believe in our own form of God. I felt that there was a real need not to create a religion. That's not what I'm here to do, but to create a space for people to come together and grow together and be good, and through story talk about morality, you know, use creativity and story to make people feel good and lift them up and build community.
Well, there's an incredible thing that happens when we connect with a character, with the emotions, with the imaginative world, in that we actually biochemically stand in their shoes and we become them, and it's hardwired into our brain to you know, that mirror phenomenon is biochemical. It's literally how we learn and grow and connect as human beings. And religion has grown to a point, or you know, it's been used over the years to bring people together, and it's also been used to separate people and to drive them apart. And I think that's where we're at now, is this, we're left with, you know, the remnants of you know, the bad side of religion, or you know, the things that have turned people off, but we haven't actually replaced it with anything except for these kind of, you know, fleeting moments where we're inspired by a particular movement or a story or even a show, you know, that kind of really hooks us in. And I think that's okay, because there is so much potential in that, you know, throwing everything up in the air and seeing what comes together. But I think we need to understand what the fundamental mechanism is that builds society, that builds us together. And, you know, creatives have that innate ability to do that.
When I hopped into NFTs, like figuring out what this was all about, I thought it was just another investment, right? And I jumped into these places where it seemed like there was genuine relationships being formed online. Never thought that was really possible. And I thought, okay, hang on a second, where I don't want to be involved. In fact, the organization, our EPF Australia, we've got two, is working diligently to reduce the harm of social media, to look at technology and its harms on young people and see how we can mitigate that. I'm actively working in a space that is looking at technology and the dangers of it. So moving into the space of online communities and talking about building a metaverse is a place that I take that really fucking seriously. But I started to challenge my assumptions around the possibility that online spaces could be places where you could genuinely help people and have a community where you could support each other and form real life relationships. Now, we already have, I formed those in my early groups, and that made me believe that actually you can do this. And one of them became a mod for Gyris. So how can you take the good of Web3 of all this great shit? How can you take the good and form an idea in a world that celebrates that and is a beacon to others? Like, this is what it should be like. So everything we do from a project side and a story side, I'm always thinking about that. How can we always stay in integrity? Everything we do so that so that we can kind of be that. We can hopefully be an inspiration for what's possible. We aren't the biggest in terms of our numbers, but our community is really fucking awesome. And I have such strong faith that organic growth will continue.
We've covered, our digital selves, our work, our life in social media, what it's like to connect and make human connections in that world. Talked about, your integrity as a company and a founder and a business owner and growing that. And I think that the parallel to, the banner under which I operate, which is Digital Twin, is exactly in that philosophy, because it started, that name, that concept of a digital twin, for me, represents this other layer that we put on top of our lives in this digital space. And when we're talking about the metaverse, it isn't some crappy pixelated or sometimes really high fidelity version of the virtual world that we enter into and play games in and maybe do some commerce and shopping in. It's actually the extra layer or another dimension on top of our reality that we fill with our imagination and our connection and our humanity. And it's been around since we have had a telephone. It's been around, even sending letters or something that is outside of our right here, right now interaction. And we've got the ability to create that persona from scratch. What a great a blank canvas that we never get. So as we go for hero, we're talking about hero's journey, reinventing ourselves. We've skipped all the hard work and we've landed in the invention phase that doesn't have the depth of experience behind it. So we're creating this digital twin of ourselves that is kind of birthing a new persona, but it doesn't have the depth. So my mission through the conversations and the work that I want to do is to build that digital twin with integrity and knowledge and connect it more closely to our real selves. Because I've been in the situation that I'm sure you've been in, where you're up until 4 or 5, you don't sleep, you're in this other space, and then you've got to have your real world as well. And you've got to have those relationships that give you the strength and bring you happiness and actually fill your cup in a way. But we've got this other world that is exciting and also just as has almost more potential for prosperity. My mission, I guess, for myself personally and the other, the conversations, is to bring those two worlds closer together. And what I love about what you're talking about with Gyris is that, you've started from the real and you're mindfully bringing in the tools and those connections into this entity that has real solid roots in the real world and real communities and, real movement.
We want to build a game like no one's ever seen. We want to give value that people have not seen. I think we do that because of the way that we're set up as a company, that we don't have people taking cuts other than their salaries. And those people will work to deliver some awesome shit. The more successful we are, the bigger and the more that we can develop. So the initial roadmap is really just a fraction of what I intend to do. we talk about being the people's marvel. Genuinely, what we want as like the big vision is that Gyris is one part of that grander narrative that I spoke to you about before. What we're saying is that like you can take control and create a whole world, and if you get enough kind of people believing in that, then it becomes reality, and that is exactly what is happening here. People are believing in it, and it is becoming reality. We're building it.
Yeah.
What we're putting in the hands of the people is bigger than Gyris itself. It is, if Gyris is Spider-Man, then all of the Thors and the Iron Mans and all of that stuff are all out there waiting to be pitched with a strong like go-to-market strategy. Here's our team. Here's how we intend to fund it. This is what we're going to do. And the DAO collectively, as a democratic unit, has to say, what do we think? Does this meet our values? Don't just fucking listen to hype. Don't just hop into a place. Do your own research. If you don't believe in it, do not spend your money. If you do, fucking ride or die with us. We're absolutely killing it. We're minting soon. It's going to be sick. Oh, no!
This is that moment in Wolf of Wall Street where Jonah Hill's got in saying, show me a check for $10,000 and I'll quit my job right now. I don't even need to see that right now. I'm quitting everything and jumping on board Gyris. And
dude, it's funny because Diggy, and he's our main man in the thing. It's exactly what he did, and I don't know if it's out loud to him. He probably go and listen to this. He's super busy right now, but like for me, that got me because I was going to keep on going, but he gave up his job and came to work with us instantly. I only gave him 2 months guaranteed, and he's like. Yeah. This is going to be it, man. I'm just so fucking blessed. But people are believers like I am, and that's fucking great, man. It really is. It's a beautiful thing. I'm super grateful for it.
Adam, like I just can't be more thankful enough for you to spend an hour and a half of your time day before you mint to chat with me. And my mission is to bring stories of people that are building in the space, and I don't think someone could epitomize that as much as you do. So like, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. I hope everything goes well in the next couple of days, but from the sounds of it, this is going to be a lifelong thing for you, and I can't wait to ride or die with it because I'm fucking on board. I can't tell you, man. I can't wait to
Thanks,
join the journey and see where it goes.